So good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to Building Blocks, City Solutions for Childcare Growth. This panel is part of Washington Families Thrive series titled Pathways to Progress, which focuses on professional development, advocacy, and resources for childcare providers. I'm Debbie Carlson, founder of Washington Families Thrive, a dedicated partner to families and businesses across Snohomish County, providing a specialized matching service that connects parents to vetted, high-quality childcare with current openings. By partnering with employers in sectors like aerospace, manufacturing, education, construction, and healthcare, we help businesses leverage federal tax credits and create childcare solutions that improve employee retention and reduce absenteeism. We also offer our services directly to families. I am honored to be joined tonight by Bothell Deputy Director or Deputy Mayor Jenne Alderks and Edmonds City Council Susan Paine. And I do want to say that Mayor Hurst from Linwood did have a emergency and he might not be able to make it. He might come in later, but I just wanted to let you all know that. We're excited for this vital discussion on how our cities can accelerate and expand the quality of childcare. At Washington Families Thrive, we believe childcare is part of a critical economic and workforce development infrastructure. Just like transportation, healthcare, and schools, it must be planned and supported as a public good to lift our families and our local economies. Right now, we are facing a massive gap in Snohomish County. We have a little over 20,000 licensed slots for more than 50,000 children aged 5 and under. This shortage is a full-blown economic crisis. Statewide, inadequate childcare costs Washington State $5 billion annually in lost earnings and productivity. Locally, Snohomish County businesses lose nearly $230 million every year due to workforce childcare challenges. The human toll is even more staggering. 1 in 4 Washington parents quit or are terminated after having a child. In our county, 30% of families have turned down jobs or promotions, and 40% have changed jobs entirely just to find the flexibility they need to survive. People often ask, why is childcare so expensive? Even with high tuition, providers struggle to stay afloat due to high staff turnover and low wages, low reimbursement rates, rising operating costs, and the weight of complex regulatory requirements. This creates a cycle where 80% of our residents live in a childcare desert, unable to find care that is affordable, close to home, or compatible with their work hours. Washington Families Thrive strives to bridge this gap. For employers, we turn childcare support into a business asset. For families, we find the needle in the haystack, the vetted program with a current opening that matches their specific shift or budget. For the 30% of providers with open licensed slots, we assist in filling those slots currently unused slots, ensuring these vital small businesses remain sustainable. Tonight, this panel will share concrete city-level solutions to turn these challenges into growth. To ground our conversation in the reality of the provider experience, I am delighted to introduce an outstanding member of the Washington Families Thrive Network. Please welcome the owner of the Creative Kids Academy in Linwood, Whitney Quillam.
Thank you. I'm Whitney. I own the Creative Kids Academy in Linwood. I opened my business in April 2023, so I've had it for 3 years now. I've been in the industry a little over 20 years, and yeah, just recently decided to take on my own center. So far, Linwood is going great. I actually just this week received my new license and opened up a 4th classroom for my location. So I'll be taking on more students soon, which is very exciting. And I am in the process of opening a second location. I just put a offer on in King County, so hoping to expand.
Thank you, Whitney. And now I want to introduce our esteemed panelists. First, Deputy Mayor Jenne Alderks joined the Bothell City Council in 2022 following her service on the city's Planning Commission. A human services professional with an MPA, a certificate in public policy and leadership from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and an advanced certificate in municipal leadership from the Association of Washington Cities. Deputy Mayor Alderks is a dedicated advocate for community-driven solutions. She was instrumental in creating the North Shore Family Partnership and currently serves on the boards of Lake City Partners Ending Homelessness and the North Urban Human Services Alliance. A champion for equity, she has co-chaired Anti-Racism Communities Bothell to address systemic discrimination and foster economic opportunity. Councilmember Susan Paine has served on the Edmonds City Council since 2020, following her tenure on the Edmonds School District Board of Directors. A retired Seattle employee where she worked in a variety of management roles. She holds a BA from the University of Washington and an MPA from Seattle University. In addition to her public service, Councilmember Paine serves on the board of At Work, a nonprofit dedicated to employment opportunities for people with disabilities. She is a proud mother of two and an avid enthusiast of local wildlife and bird watching. I want to welcome both of our panelists.
Thank you. Yes, I'd love to also review some of the recent changes that we've made in the city of Bothell. We, as many cities know, comprehensive plan season just ended, and in our new comprehensive plan, one of the first things that we did around childcare was permitting. Permitting childcare as neighborhood scale commercial. So instead of blocking, in an effort, a broader effort to create more walkable neighborhoods and more amenities within our neighborhoods, we counted childcare centers as neighborhood scale retail. So, our ideas are you can find what you need within your community. And so that was one of the things that we've done. We've also had um, some zoning changes around like larger daycare centers. For example, Birch Tree recently opened up two locations in Bothell and over as downtown has been redeveloped. They are permitted by right in most of our retail and commercial zones and conditionally permitted in highest density residential zones. Um, so that means that it's it's an allowable use in highest density residential. And the Birch Tree in downtown Bothell is a good example. It's actually first floor retail of a 6-story apartment building. Um, and so that means that the folks who live there in those apartments have childcare right downstairs on their way out the door in the morning. Um, we also, in the Canyon Park sub area, so if anybody's familiar with Canyon Park, Snohomish County side of Bothell, the only restriction is not within 500 feet of 405, and that's for environmental and air quality reasons. We also, not too long ago, eliminated parking minimums in Bothell throughout the city. And so that was really nice to see that it was on the list of like, what can cities do? It wasn't just for childcares that we did that. It was for all businesses so that we are trying to spur economic vitality in our community by creating walkable spaces where people can access what it is they're looking for. We've also recently reduced impact fees to lower the barriers to new business owners starting businesses in Bothell. Um, and so we've really tried to look at a lot of different angles. And I would say that daycares have benefited from the type of economic vitality work that we've been doing. Even though the only specific like daycare policy that I was able like that the city has put forward and that I was the one who suggested it because my background in early childhood education was that daycare should be allowed in all neighborhood areas. Like there shouldn't be a restriction, because that's where families are hoping to find, in-home daycares. And that came about because I believe a complaint from somebody saying, should this daycare be allowed to exist in this neighborhood? And I said, well, daycare should be allowed to exist in every neighborhood. So that may not have been the intention from that community member, but that was the result that I heard a need and saw that that was something that we could do in our community. So, um, I realize that's, when we're talking about zoning and permitting, it can be very dry and very boring, but those are some of the strategies that we've been able to put into place in Bothell, and I'm definitely open to exploring what else we can do. But I have more thoughts that I can share later too.
It's a great question, and it's something that Edmonds has not, we're the opposite of Bothell in many ways. We during the pandemic, what happened is we had a lot of young families move to Edmonds, and that was great. But we don't have a lot of early child care centers and the at-home, child care child care homes. It's just there aren't very many, and we still have the very restrictive um, practices in place. So one of the things I'm hoping to do, and I was so excited to get to meet you and talk with you, Debbie, is just to reinvigorate the sort of conversation about Edmonds has conditional use permits, and there's hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. We we can't get out of our way quickly enough. Starting next year, the state is going to have some mandatory changes, but with some local, customization. I'm hoping that we can leapfrog a little bit faster and do similar things as Bothell. I don't think that we need to have a conditional use permit. I think that we can reduce the permit fees. We can fast track permits, just for if there has to be any permitting going on, and reduce the impact fees for any new development, new buildings that are providing that. The list is really long about some of the things that can be the best practices, and it's exciting to know that we can reinvigorate this. I don't know how young families, families with young children can manage to work through all of the things that they have to do just to find the childcare, and then have all these barriers that are artificially put into place. They I think that the code that the state put together, which says, just not in industrial or semi-industrial areas, and so I think that having childcare in neighborhoods and in sort of like the middle housing mix to make sure that people have access is something that I'm hoping we can get into Edmonds pretty quickly. But it's land use is not sexy talk, and it's like people get pretty spun around by that too. So it's and I think that education will remove some of the barriers. So I'm glad to be here and to learn more and see what's successful. And I also am very curious from the business owner side, what are the biggest challenges, and what have they found to be successful, and what people want to see.
Thank you. Um, the next question I have for you as panelists is, are there specific tax incentives or breaks available for childcare owners in your cities? And Councilmember Paine, why don't you take this on first?
Well, we have no, we're the worst. We're the poster child for what not to do. In many ways, some of this the structure that we have now really does need to be modernized. And I've already had conversations. I think I spoke to you because I've already talked to our planning and land use folks, and they're like, yeah, we should do this. Yay. Yeah, we should. We really should. And staff are on board to get this shepherd through. Um, I love the idea of having reduced permit fees. You know, fast tracking the permits and also making sure that we have reduced impact fees for the new businesses, and making sure that we remove as many barriers as possible. I think that there's some things that people want to overregulate about, and I wish that Edmonds had had the chance to do no parking minimums as well, because the one um person that I did talk to about this, she's like, well, what about all the parking? It's like, why would we, let's not let that drive good policy. So anyway, those are my thoughts. We don't have any, tax incentives. We don't have any incentives at all. I'm hoping that we can create them. There you go.
Thank you. Well, let it be known here. Maybe it's starting a movement. How about you, Deputy Mayor Alderks?
Thank you. Well, one thing that is kind of automatically a tax break is that Bothell does not have a business and occupation tax. So that's not something that our local childcare owners and business owners need to be dealing with. Most of the incentives are actually state B&O tax exemptions. And then there's also exemptions for property taxes that are available through county assessors. So like by default, it's a tax break because there isn't a B&O tax, but there's not additional tax incentives that we're doing in the city of Bothell.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is, and I'll have Deputy Mayor Alderks maybe start us off this time, is does your Economic Development Division offer any unique programs or trainings for the childcare sector?
Yeah, Bothell has a really fantastic partnership with 425 Business. And I wouldn't say it's specifically geared towards childcare businesses and business owners, but they do a series of small business workshops at City Hall a couple of times a year that I would be really curious if any business owner, like childcare business owners, had participated or do participate, if they feel like those offerings are relevant and supportive to the work that they're doing. But they really are providing support on, looking at like margins, staffing shortages, and like guidance, getting guidance through the regulations. Um, we also like one of our funnest, I would say, projects for economic development has been the pop shops in downtown Bothell. It has nothing to do with childcare. It really is empowering small business owners who are kind of like the maker like artisan goods. And so that's been a really fun project to see kind of take off in the community. We're also starting a new food truck incubator program. So that's the type of innovative things that Bothell wants to do. And I do think that there would be interest and creativity to spare around supporting childcare if there was some thoughts along those lines that we could pursue. Staff also is available to work with businesses. They'll do some kind of like navigation support of hosting one-on-one meetings to understand the local permitting process. Um, and there's also, referrals and networking that our economic development director is able to do. Just a fantastic, energetic young person who is really interested in diving deep in supporting businesses in Bothell. There's also networking with our human services department around partnering with nonprofit partners. So there's, resources like the Imagine Institute that can help licensed childcare providers, expand and scale. So those are some of the efforts that I see going on, but I definitely think that there's opportunity for for more tailored approaches that would support childcare business owners.
We have an energetic and small business community, just as you know, Deputy Mayor Alderks was saying, it's like we Edmonds does not have a business and occupation tax, and that's it seems like that it hurts small business, and that's where we really need to keep adding more opportunities. And in Edmonds, we've been creating these neighborhood hubs and centers so that we have the neighborhoods can have little growth areas where you can add commercial, and it's more housing can be put into there, and it's been identified for many of our areas, and I think that these are areas and possibilities for having maybe larger format childcare centers, or even the at-home childcare centers as well. We um, we also have an incubator inside our Chamber of Commerce, which I can't imagine that they've got a whole lot of childcare providers there, but it is there, and it's very business friendly, and would absolutely be glad to support any new businesses opening up and coming into Edmonds, which is what we want to see. And I know that we have some child care centers that we have co-located with our Francis Anderson Center. We have Main Street Kids, which is fun, and they've been there for a very long time, and they're just a pillar in our community. And and we do our best to support them, but we also need to rely on having more options for more families too. So it's the need is great. I mean the numbers between 20,000 slots and then 50,000, those under by age 5, that's that's a big hurdle. So I think the barriers are real, and we need to start addressing them in a more meaningful way.
Of the thoughts that Councilmember Paine is sharing here, because when you think bigger picture around childcare issues, a lot of times, if we had like the most generous childcare funding structure in the state and said, we're going to build childcares all over the place, there would still be barriers at the city to placing and citing those childcares. If even if the state could put in, make a universal preschool program, right? And then they would still be like, okay, but now the cities are making it hard for us to do it. And so that kind of coordination, if we're going to dream big as a state, we have to have cities who can get on board and adapt to the needs of their community. And we've seen through, kind of like other situations around middle housing, neighborhood retail, that there are many cities who are just not willing to get on board with big visions around addressing the pressing needs of our communities. It's interesting to see that tension between the state and local control with cities. So I think that, you're right on the money here, Debbie, in the fact that you're talking about like, well, what do cities need to do? Because even if we had all the money in the world to put childcares everywhere, cities would still be a place where we'd have to be changing policies so that they would be allowed and be able to be built and open.
It's true. It's 100% true. When I served on the Edmonds School Board, one of the projects that was begun, and I don't know the status of it now, was to have do early childhood education for some of the childcare providers that were next to schools and sponsored, in the neighborhoods, or sometimes were co-located at the schools for before and after care, but also for the youngest of students. And this also included having, the school district bringing in the educators to make sure everybody was caught up with the licensing and all the other things there. It was such a cool idea, just to make sure that there was adequate childcare, either at the school or adjacent to the school, to make sure that was a really smooth connection, from trying to address the birth to age 7 or 8, and getting all those kids into strong learning sort of situations. So there are plenty of ideas that are really going to be could be game changing. But I do think it's the regulatory side. I mean, Edmonds is an old city. Our entire code needs to be entirely revamped. Newer cities have benefited by having more modern codes. So we still have some things that are 100 years old in our code books. So this is the time to get things all straightened out, and I really appreciate that the state has put in the effort to make some big decisions that support this.
I will say that in researching, there was some really exciting work that the Edmonds School District was doing to support and increase childcare. And I'm gonna actually, because you mentioned that, Councilmember Paine, I'm interested, um, um, Deputy Mayor Alderks, do you know if the school district, would it be North Shore, or has worked at all with childcare, and made it, because they own property, like has built have built some partnerships with childcare?
I'm not aware of North Shore's partnerships with childcare, and City of Bothell is entirely within the North Shore School District boundaries, and it's like 8 municipalities total are in North Shore School District, but we are lucky that even though we're split between 2 counties, we at least have one school district serving our communities and our families. There has been talk at North Shore around how to utilize surplus land owned by the school. And so I think childcare is an opportunity to pursue there. But I have not heard if anything like that is being pursued. And from my perspective as a city leader, my goal really is to make sure that we are good partners with our school district. That, we're trying to partner with them on rights of ways and safe streets and sidewalks approaching schools, and so that's some of our most effective partnerships that we've been able to do with the school district is making sure that the city infrastructure is there to support schools. I'd be really curious if anybody knows anything going on in North Shore about early learning, because like while it's outside of my like jurisdiction as a city leader, there might be opportunities for partnership there that I'd want to know about.
Well, this is kind of a segue to our last question, because it's about partnerships. And how about Councilmember Paine, if you took this on, what collaborations are in progress with the county, other cities, or the state to help childcare providers thrive in your cities?
Well, we we have a pretty severe budget shortfall going on right now. So, and as I've been saying all night, all evening, this is we're stymied by bad codes and inertia. So, moving this along would be very helpful to move to have us leap forward into like the 21st century. I think that would be a huge plus for the families here in Edmonds. But also, it's more than just Edmonds. It's we have people who come into Edmonds to work in Edmonds, and so Main Street Kids has some really great prices. I was looking at them today, but I'm sure they've got a long waiting list. Having people come in and pressure the city to like, well, this is crazy. Why do I need to have a conditional use permit, which is a huge, onerous, expensive process. So we need to do some work on that. in the first place. Some of the things that I think that would be compelling is to provide the information about, the needs, what the needs are and what the gaps are. And you provided that, tonight was like, well, that's a lot. I had no idea. I know Snohomish County is a desert, and I know that the at the county level of government they've made some changes, but and what Deputy Mayor Alderks was saying is that we have, it's the city which is the lowest level of government, and we have all sorts of barriers or just weird things. It's like, do you have to, fix up sidewalks? How do you manage to make this easy for smaller businesses? I think, again, I think working with the school district for help with, before and after school care would be, I think, very helpful. Having a clearinghouse for the information, what you provide, Debbie, in your work, to have those dialogues and having access that way would be very would be important, just to make sure that we get the right information out to, to the families and to the businesses, to make sure that there's a nice sort of matching things up. So, there's a lot that we can continue to do, and the natural collaborations are chambers of commerce, school districts, our economic development people as well. So,
Deputy Mayor Alderks, do you have anything you would like to add about collaborations at the city, state, county level?
Well, so when it comes to partnerships, I think Bothell is definitely, like, I know that I'm interested in pursuing what those partnerships with might be. So if there are, counties and other cities that want to look at options, I can tell you that in my involvement through the Association of Washington Cities, there was a group of, moms, elected officials who are moms who were just like, we need to be doing something statewide, city to city, to talk about childcare. And unfortunately, that I don't think that partnership went very far in terms of conversation and policies that could be pursued. I think it's worthy to pick it back up and see, especially around this like package of proposals that you've brought forward and in the survey tonight. Yes, Danica. I think I remember that I think you were in that conversation, were you? But yeah, that conversation definitely needs to get back going at the Association of Washington Cities. And so please reach out to some of the lobbyists and city reps that are involved there, because I know that you'll find an appetite for that conversation. One partnership that I do want to share with the state is through the Department of Commerce, was the Early Learning Facilities Program. And they awarded $56 million in grants in 2025 to 2027. And, this is just, you celebrate your wins where you can find them, which is we have one awardee in Bothell who was given $125,000 for maintenance of a facility. So to be able to connect to, state funding opportunities like that, I think is really important. And I'm glad that one of our providers was able to have that, be successful in that grant. But, like we talked about school districts, and it makes absolute sense that you could have before and after school programs in neighborhoods near schools. And, I think with policies like the neighborhood scale commercial allowances and permits, that you can start seeing more of those pop up, because that's what's going to be naturally occurring and what's going to be beneficial for people, to I'd love to see business owners recognize that those opportunities are available in Bothell and start looking into pursuing them. We should have a lot of really creative, driven, passionate people who live in our community, and it's amazing to see what they are able to accomplish when they know that the opportunities are available to them. And sometimes they come to city council and they say, hey, you could make this easier for us if you removed this barrier. And we do try to be very responsive to our community when we hear those kinds of needs being expressed. So that's what I've got on that. But thank you. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. Okay. So now we would like to open the floor for the audience, for audience questions. Audience members, you all can submit your questions in the chat, or you can just raise your hand, and I'll just call on individuals in the order that I see them. I know that there's several childcare providers or individuals that are developing childcare centers here, and I'm really excited to hear either your stories or questions. This is the time. And so I want to invite that now. Yes, Billy, welcome.
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to talk a little. My name is Billy. I own three locations in Snohomish County, two in Granite Falls, another ancient city. I had to literally rewrite the city ordinances to get my child care center 12 years ago licensed. I've been through it. I understand. Um, and I have another location in Marysville. I did want to talk a little bit about schools and using them as licensed childcare centers. The state of Washington actually makes it very easy for us as providers to partner with school districts because they're already following the WACs and RCWs that licensing requires, as well as the fire marshal. So it's a very easy, seamless process. The challenge we had in a rural Snohomish County, in a desert, we have limited access for classrooms and growth. The program that we were in, we were let go of, which was fine, and they expanded to their classrooms. But when it came to renegotiating and talking about opening up a before and after school program, they weren't as willing to work with us, which was sad because they wanted to charge us a huge astronomical daily rate. And so I think just thinking about the big picture and how that it would affect programs and thinking about innovative ways to use unused spaces, gyms is a wonderful area to open up to allow before and after school care. And in my proposal that I had, I wanted to utilize paraeducators that are currently working with children, especially our kids that are with special needs that might have a para, so they could be in their natural environments, right? And so, anyways, I think it's very doable. I think it's wonderful that the state, or Edmonds, as well as Bothell, is open to working with childcare providers because it is needed.
Thank you, Billy. Yeah, I do happen to know that Edmonds and maybe Councilmember Paine, it sounded like you were maybe at the starting end of this, but that there's some really exciting work that has been done with childcare. And in fact, when I was doing research, it was the only area that because one of the things that both counties and even the state can do is give access to surplus land, including school districts, surplus land to childcare providers at a lower rate, like they do with low income housing. And so there's already a model out there about how to do this. I think that we should start talking about that childcare providers could also have access to that model and grow their businesses in and around school districts. So thank you, Billy, for saying that. And yeah, thank you. Is there other questions, comments?
Maybe while we wait for folks to, formulate questions or if they want to raise their hand, just a couple of thoughts from what Billy was saying and connecting to earlier points in the conversation around like old code. Like we're talking code written before women had the ability to like have a credit card in their name or run a business or, like when it wasn't socially acceptable for women to work outside of the home. Like this is code that hasn't been updated since the, sexual liberation movement and the ability for, the second and third wave feminism. And so our code doesn't reflect our modern society in that regard. So, you know, we were kind of talking around it. I just felt like we needed to say it. That when we talk about the need for code to be updated, it's because there have been massive cultural shifts that have not yet been addressed in code. And then the other piece was around housing costs for childcare providers. If you don't own the home where your childcare is actually being providing services, then we often hear from, like, one of the biggest streams that we hear from childcare providers is the ability to afford housing in Bothell, and how they're displaced families who have lost uh, lost their childcare providers because they've been priced out of the community and have had to move away to more affordable places. And just the emotional impact that can have, not just on the family, but especially on children, because these are attachments that children are forming with other adults, and they don't understand when, they hear Miss Rebecca had to move away because they couldn't, like, she couldn't afford to find a house anymore, right? Like, that doesn't make sense to a 2 or 3 year old. They just know that Miss Rebecca is gone, and that is a loss to that child. So one of the things that we are working on in Bothell is around affordable housing. We recently donated land in downtown to a church who is working with a nonprofit affordable housing developer to build subsidized housing in downtown. And that's going to be actually very close to the birch tree that I mentioned earlier. So it'll be fantastic for the families that are able to move into that space, that they'll have childcare right across the street, and subsidized housing for childcare providers. That project also is going to have the bottom floor be commercial space for nonprofits. So think about, like, the neighborhood center in Linwood, the Together Center in Redmond. Bothel's really, like, this church is really leading the way in creating a space like that for our Bothell community as well. So I just wanted to put a plug in how important affordable housing options are, and the ability for, I was a childcare provider too. The subsidized wages of childcare providers cannot keep up with the price of housing in our communities. And so we have basically, we're building a system where childcare providers have to be able to find subsidized housing because their wages are already subsidized. So that's another important piece of this conversation, and I'm glad that it was brought up tonight.
Thank you. And I see that Whitney has her hand up.
Yeah, so a few things now that the subsidized care was just brought up. So there's a big discussion right now that DSHS is moving to attendance based pay. So that means that childcare providers will only be paid for the days the child actually attends our centers, which I feel like is a huge loss. Because we can't fill those additional days, or if they call and they say, hey, my child's going to be sick today, we don't have a drop-in backup that day. So then we're now just not going to be paid for that day of that child's care. I just feel like it's really, really unfortunate, and a definite loss for us. It has me questioning whether I will continue to allow subsidy in my center or not, especially if I'm going to be losing income on a daily and weekly basis that I can't recoup when providing care and being a smaller center. I'm not a large corporation. I do this with my savings, with my own income, with my family's income to support my child care center. I'm not a multi-million dollar business. It's a scary reality to look at, that not only are those rates already substantially low, but then they're going to be cut again by only attendance-based care slots. One of the big things I just wanted to bring up too is, like, when we're talking about, public schools and having care in public schools. And for me, that rings a bell of, like, oh, transitional kindergarten, free kindergarten. I think a lot of childcare providers, we are very worried. We've already seen what transitional kindergarten has done to our centers and taking away our enrollment. I just started my center in 2023, and that following year, TK hit, and I lost half of my pre-K program. I mean, what parent doesn't want to pay, not have to pay for childcare, right? And that's free. So part of me is worried, and I'm wondering if cities are waiting for more transitional kindergartens to open and expand. And that's why there's just, I guess, less support for childcare providers in general is, we're really waiting for the state to push those additional slots, open up those spaces, and then there's not such a need for us, right? I feel like my fear is childcare centers will go from birth to 2.5, and then transitional kindergarten will take over 2.5 to 6, which leaves us with a very limited amount of care we can provide and only 2.5 years worth of children in our care, which we can't survive off of 3 classrooms or 2 classrooms of only 0 to 2.5-year-olds, right? We need all of our classrooms open and able to function and pay our teachers, pay our rents, everything else that comes into running a childcare center. So I don't know if either of you as city members have heard anything about transitional kindergarten, if there's talks about, waiting for those additional spaces to open up and what that looks like, I guess, more from a city level. And then on top of that, I think the accountability too of these public schools is they're supposed to be partnering with us as childcare centers, and we're just not seeing that. I haven't been reached out to by one public school in the last 2 years to partner with me or ask questions about, hey, does this child attend your care? Or, before we take on this student, we just want to make sure that they're not in your care. I haven't been reached out to by one school in my district. So I think the accountability piece needs to be there for these public schools as well, and who is holding them accountable to be partnering with us fully.
Can respond that, like, do we have any legislators on the call? I would ask that question of the legislators.
Right. And to answer your specific question, I haven't heard anything. Well, it's Edmonds. We're we're not leading the way with modern, sort of, apparatuses to work with. But and so the city of Edmonds is not at all looking at just keeping childcare providers, limited to just a certain age group. That is not at all going on in Edmonds. And I think that would be uh, a quality of. I don't think that we could even step into it, frankly. I mean, we would like to have the businesses thriving, and so why would we be pressing on any of the levers? I think some of that would be a good question, to talk with maybe school board members and see how that goes. But that's more of a school district thing rather than a city thing. And Billy had her hand up too.
Yeah, Billy, if you want to go ahead.
I was just gonna, well said, Whitney. I think everybody can echo that. I think that we're all very concerned about it. And I think as city leaders, it's important that you're aware of what is actually happening, because it is an actual RCW violation and a WAC violation. TKPK rewrote our RCWs and our WACs that are surrounding childcare and specifically licensing, and the partnering. There isn't any accountability. It's stated right in there that they're supposed to be doing it, but who is holding them accountable? It is a legislative question. It's not going to be handled as it should be. If I had done something illegal, I would have had licensing out. I would have been written up. It would have went on my permanent license. It would be documented. I would be slandered all over social media once everybody else found out. So I just think it's good that Whitney did bring this up, because it is important. And like Whitney, I've had my centers for over 12 years, actually 15 years now. And I have 2 classrooms that are completely empty. And guess where they all went? Right to the school district. So, time will tell that quality childcare and early learning will happen. And we're going to get those kids back, because we can't compete with free. We have to pay our providers well. And the ones that we adore, we give them insurance, and we give them 401ks, and we give them all of the things that we want to give them to retain them. But we have to have full centers to stay open.
And thank you, Billy. I do want to just acknowledge, I know Steve is not able to speak. So I wanted to just say that Steve is the mayor of Mount Lake Terrace, and he said that they changed the code to allow for a low income childcare facility. It took a while, but we got it done. And just wanted to congratulate Mount Lake Terrace for that. That's exciting. And one other thing I just wanted to share with folks is I gave a report to all of our representatives here. And it's a report that came out in December of 2025, and it's called Increasing the Supply of Early Child Care Education Facilities in Washington State. And I'm happy to give that report to any of y'all that are pretty wonky policy people. There are some really solid suggestions of what cities can do, counties and state. And actually, Councilmember Paine alluded to it. There have been laws just recently passed, both this year and last year, meaning 2025 and 2024, that actually kind of address some of the issues that you were talking about from parking. It eliminates minimum parking requirements in cities. It eliminates some of the barriers around zoning. And gosh, I was doing research, and there was a couple things that I was like, oh, the state's already, already changed this law. But like council member Paine said, that it hasn't been enacted yet, but it will be. And I'm sure that cities are going to be, especially your city planners, your land use planners, will be addressing and changing the codes. Yeah, go ahead.
Can add
Please.
a little bit to that. The deadline is, I think, July 1st, the end of June next year. So, but there's always going to be some allowable customization for the cities for whatever, whatever sort of incentives or whatever sort of, other conditions that they want to put on there. And it's a really great article. I really loved that. I sent it to their planning department and had them read it, and I'm sure that they'll be glad to know that this has been recorded. It's so, and there's an other good resource. It's the Municipal Research Service Center, MRSC. They have a couple of long articles about what the laws were. It's mrsc.org, and just they have a search field that you can that plug in for childcare, and it automatically will pop up with some of the best practices as well. So.
And I was just going to say, it's just we're talking about partnerships and we're talking about partnering schools. And that was more of my point of, if you're going to partner, you need to know who you're partnering with and what's happening behind closed doors, right? And then the effect that it has on us as childcare providers. But the other piece I wanted to share, it's not in Edmonds, it's not in Bothell, it's with my new center I've been in the process of purchasing. I think it would be great to streamline the permit process. I've been in the process of trying to get a correct certificate of occupancy for this school that already has kids in it that I'm trying to take on. It should have had the correct certificate of occupancy from the beginning. It's been open for 7 years, but I'm going into my 3rd month of permit review for a certificate of occupancy of E or I for an already standing childcare center. So I definitely think just streamlining permit processing. 2, I think the disconnect between like state fire marshal and city fire marshal, there's definitely a disconnect there between what's allowable and not allowable, and they don't align. That's what took my current center almost 2 years to open up my additional new classroom. Luckily, a fire code changed recently and kind of streamlined that for me. But it would be great to have some alignment between city and state, especially as far as fire marshal and code goes, what's allowable and what's not. And then, like fine tuning, I guess, the reasons of why particularly egress matters as far as like voice activated fire systems and all of that. But yeah, it's definitely a process now for childcare centers and providers to open our programs. Not anything with the city, but we have a pre-licensing process we have to go through now, which has no timeline. I'm going into month 5 of trying to get my center I'm purchasing licensed. It used to be a 90-day process, but now they have a licensing before the pre-licensing with no timeline. So my license was just passed off to the local office on Friday, and now I have 90 days for them to hopefully approve my license to have children in my program more than half day, more than 4 hours a day. And then on top of that, the permitting just isn't helping going into month 3 on that as well. So
Yeah. The permitting for some development is has some, some timelines that are mandatory by the state, but I'm fairly certain that it doesn't include, childcare centers and other, service, businesses like that. So I'm really sorry to hear that. That's a lot, particularly when there should be no daylight between what the state's fire code says and what the city's fire code says. That I thought that was all uniform, but maybe it's not. So I'm distressed to hear that.
Actually, a suggestion in the report is streamlining permitting processes and actually specifically for childcare providers because childcare providers is a business, they are providing a public good. And part of what the idea behind recognizing childcare providers as a public good is that there's some precedents for streamlining permitting and so forth. And I'm curious uh, if either of you had any conversations with your staff, your planning staff, your um, land use staff, or permitting staff around the possibility of streamlining.
Well, everything should be streamlined. I mean, there should be no, kind of circle, having permits cycle through and cycle through. That needs to happen pretty in a really straightforward fashion. It's like, okay, I know I had to do, permitting for my fence. I had to show this and this and this. It should be really straightforward and clear. And getting caught in endless loops it's problematic. I think one of the things that we can do for childcare centers is reduce the cost for permitting, and we can also move them to the front of the line. And that's also something that I've suggested for nonprofits. If you're going to build low-income housing and you're a nonprofit or a not-for-profit, you can move to the front of the line and then also have reduced permitting, because that's also a public good. Just as we were talking about earlier, we have to have housing for people to provide this service as well. So fast tracking will, just keep them at the front of the line. It's like, oh, there's Whitney's permit. Let me take it out of the stack and put it up on top of the stack and do it that way, so that this can be out there into the public a lot faster. So those are some of the things that we have done for a few things, and I'm not recalling what we did for the Boys and Girls Center. They're rebuilding their building in Edmonds, but I know that we made some special arrangements to make sure that things happen quickly. So,
thank you. Deputy Mayor Aldrich, would you like to?
Absolutely. What Whitney's describing just sounds like a nightmare. Like it's not it like yeah, it's not okay. I can't speak for your city and what they're going through. I know that in my experience being on council, when we hear frustrating stories like that being shared from our community, our council is highly motivated to do something to change it. And so if you have been able to contact council members and make them aware of what you are experiencing, I hope that you are finding people who are motivated to like seek solutions and to improve the process. Um, I've been glad to see opportunities like that present itself in Bothell, and like that's how our reduced impact fees came about, was that business owners came in and said, this is a real barrier to us being able to like do something meaningful with this space that is underutilized. What are you going to do to help us make it happen? And we were able to shift policy to do that. Um, yeah, I'd like to think that that happens everywhere. I don't know if it does. I'm so sorry. I'm seeing you shaking your head. That is a no.
From experience, it does not happen. I was actually on a planning committee for a while and then decided it wasn't beneficial for the time that I already don't have in my day to commit full time to something else. So I actually left that planning board. But yeah, it's definitely, I feel like for Bothell, you're very progressive. You're definitely forward thinking. And the most supportive that I've heard, and just supporting your community as a whole, not even childcare providers in general. But yeah, it's definitely a struggle in the city that I'm working with currently. It's like a loop. Like they've already had the certificate of occupancy. It's already been in review for 3 months. And although I don't have a lot of control because the current owner is working with her architect to re-push that occupancy permit through, it's gone under review now. This is the second time, but each time they take their full 3 weeks, and it's like, you've already reviewed it. If you have comments, why not just put it back on your desk? And their response is, well, we only review on Fridays. So on Fridays we'll review, but then if they don't have time that Friday, it goes 2 more weeks out, and then we're 3 more weeks out. And then, there was a small error with something on the permit. So then they had her architect resubmit it. So now we're under another 3 week review. And I'm like, why couldn't you just pick it up again that Friday, review it, right? You already know the permit that we're talking about and the occupancy, and get that to us, because her business at this point is failing. She's, asked and reached out multiple times, like, what can I do? How can I pass my business off before it's just not here anymore? And not only that, she's losing families at this point because she can't support her business how it needs to be, and she can't get it through the licensing. So I'm just waiting to come in and hopefully make some progress there and take on full-time parents and support the center. And it's like, it's a waiting game. I mean, yeah, I've been waiting for about 5 months now for this purchase to go through.
That's terrible. It is a failure of government when that sort of thing happens.
And I do want to, I'm sure there's a couple more providers that haven't spoke up yet or planning on being providers, but I hear stories like Whitney's and also Billy's multiple times. This isn't new. And um, yeah, one of the things, a takeaway that I'm getting from both of you is that it would be advantageous for providers to come together and speak to city council members, and really share their story, so that there can be some deeper understanding and strategies in how the laws should be changed.
Right.
And city by city.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Find out how your city manages public comment in city council meetings. Figure out how to email and send messages. I can tell you that putting it on the public record in a public comment can get things happening a lot faster than an email. Um, so some of the just like navigating, like how do you navigate your city hall and access meeting information is sometimes the barrier that people like are experiencing to getting their voice heard. And not every city makes it as transparent as possible to find that information either.
Debbie Rosario Reyes with the Latino Education and Training Institute. We are attempting to have a childcare in the Linwood area, so I'm very appreciative of this forum that you presented. I have several questions, but I will approach you later for that. And the idea to approach the city council to expedite perhaps permits that's a good one. So, but thank you, Debbie, for putting this presentation.
Yeah, and to be clear, like city council members can't expedite individual permit processes, but they can look at the permit process as a whole and say, does there need to be changes in policy so that nobody is experiencing this experience in the future, right? So it's rewriting the rules so that the rules are easier to navigate and can be expedited. It's not necessarily saying like we want this one person with the, to get this outcome. But sometimes all it takes is one person raising an awareness of something to then be able to revise and reform that policy and make that policy better for everybody in the community or, everybody within that category of provider.
And, if Steve could put a note in the chat about what specifically Motlake Terrace did to allow for the specifics so that, I can take language like that and I can go ahead and find it online as well, and have that be replicated in Edmonds, and Linwood would also benefit by that too, I'm certain. Oh, there's Steve.
No, I was going to say, I've been quiet. Let me see if you can hear me. Can you hear me at all?
Yes.
I'm
Pretty
totally not
good.
trying. I was going to say, I'm not trying to be dramatic. I promise. It's just how my voice is right now. So we actually found that we had a site that actually bordered Linwood. So I'm sorry George wasn't able to make it because we could have talked through it together. But on our side of the fence, if you will, it was over in the Safeway area. So it was already zoned a certain way. And so to be able to create the space for a childcare facility to be there, it was going to change that same coding across the city in these other spaces. And that was why it took so long, is that we wanted to make sure while we were trying to open up, clearly make sense for this childcare facility, that we didn't inadvertently open the city up to, well, now you can do anything you want because of just the way the language is written. And I would just say for folks who aren't electeds or think about these things, therein actually lies the problem. You can't isolate anything. So if you make a decision one place, it literally is across the board, and you have to think about that because of just the interplay. And as much as I love to think everybody's out there doing the right thing, some people are just looking for loopholes to take advantage of ways to move their project forward, if you will. So that's why it was a long dance, but it was the right thing to do. And then we're just stepping back and looking at all the code as we speak in general, because I want to go back to that earlier comment that childcare facilities should be in every neighborhood. And why are we talking about code? So it's like we're looking at all of them as we go through. So that's the most I've talked all day. I hope you heard some of that. And again, not trying to be dramatic. It's just one of those things.
Thank you, Steve. And that's exciting. That's a big win. I also want to acknowledge Debbie Ham, who's actually from a different part of Washington State, Southwest Washington, noted that the stories being shared here reflect what she also hears in Southwest Washington. And I wanted to just emphasize that so many providers experience, there's a lot of commonalities throughout the state. I wanted to catch on a theme that I'm hearing, and that is there have been times when there's nonprofits, whether it's around low-income housing or it's maybe with Boys and Girls Club or YMCAs, to help those entities go through the process, the permitting process or whatnot, kind of help them to get what they need so that they can provide the public good, whether that's housing or after school care or childcare. Um, I and I want to invite any of the providers here to also share one of the things that's a bit of a history around childcare, although it is a public good, because it has traditionally been undervalued in our society. And Deputy Mayor Alderks, you really pointed that out, that there, because of that, a lot of, instead of it going in a nonprofit direction, it went to a business direction, because that's what women could really make sure that they were getting paid for what they were doing. There's a long history of that. And so now we have a childcare sector that is their businesses, and in many ways are treated like businesses, but it's still a public good. So it's a very unique sector, that it is a business, but it does provide a public good. And I've even had some conversations with some other providers on the line where they where I hear stories of providers and directors talking about that their centers are the hub of communities, are the hub of families. And that's really that public good factor that comes in. And I would venture to say that that's where the codes haven't kept up to date with really the motivation to streamline, the motivation to provide that surplus land at a discount rate to childcare providers, that motivation to work more closely with school districts as a partner rather than almost as a competition of different educational systems. But that I would invite us to think about childcare as a sector, as education and as resources and a service for children. I don't think I have to convince anybody here of that, but how do our systems treat the childcare sector in a way that as they do with low income housing or other entities like healthcare and other infrastructure entities that really support a community.
Well, can I kind of riff off of that a bit? And one of the things that I was, kind of pondering, and I made my note here. It's like, should, early child care also be considered an essential good for the community? And that would maybe framing it in a way that this is essential for success in all communities. I mean, I moved to Edmonds because of the school district. A lot of people make those decisions based on what is going to be best for the family. And so, and if it was, categorized as essential, would that mean that we would be able to expand some availability of impact fee exemptions and some of the other things and really frame it a little bit differently? I mean, housing should be considered essential, an essential need, and so therefore housing is an essential piece of infrastructure. It's you know it, it's something that I think we need to really reconsider what some of these things are. And as Jeannie and you, Debbie, were talking about it, or Jenny, were talking about it. It is, it's classically been women's work, and that this is stuff that needs to be address. Address these sort of neglected parts of what our community really needs. So there's my soapbox. There you go.
I'd also love to jump into just so I'm having a hard time believing that it was almost 20 years ago that it was 20 years ago when I was in my master's program in early childhood education. And one of the conversations that we had was we haven't yet found the right like framing for childcare as a public good. And so I'm really glad that this conversation's happening. And I will say that since then, since 2006, the best framing I have heard around the nature of childcare being a public good is actually from the Biden administration, that childcare is infrastructure. And Susan said it too, right? If housing is infrastructure and it's a public good and childcare is a public good, it's also part of the infrastructure of our communities. And I was really heartened to see what the Biden administration was doing and saying around childcare as infrastructure needs, and I was looking forward to, seeing what that would look like down into local communities. And and I think not having that as a federal initiative happening at the federal government at this point, we can still take that framing and apply it at the state level, at the county level, at the city level, and talk about like what are we doing to make sure that we have adequate childcare infrastructure within our communities. So I respect your soapbox, Susan. Thank you.
Well, yeah. Well, it is. It is, we have remnants of all sorts of levels of discrimination, and it is pervasive, and we we just need to get over ourselves a little bit and just say what's going to clear the path. So.
Well, we are at our end, and I just want to express my gratitude to both Deputy Mayor Alderks and Councilmember Paine for participating as panelists in this important discussion and about the growth of childcare and exploring how cities can play a crucial role in alleviating barriers and reducing costs for childcare providers. I do want to say that our next event in the Pathways to Progress series will be May 11th at 6:30, or it's actually at 6. It's in partnership with the Steely Valley Chamber of Commerce in Arlington, titled Make Better with, or Market Better with Confidence. It'll be a marketing workshop. And so I hope to see you all there. I just want to thank everyone for being here. I really felt like this was a vibrant conversation, and I hope that you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for
this was a lot of
hosting,
fun.
Debbie. Yeah. Good to hear from other cities and perspectives of people in the area.
This is a good group. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.